debt. Hingað kominn William K. Black, hann bandarískur fjármála eftirlitsmaður, höfundur bókar sem kom út fyrir nokkrum árum og heitir The Best Way to Rob a Bank is to Own One. Þessi bók fjallar það sem hét Savings og Loans skandalinn í Ameríku sem hann rannsakaði. Við komum inn að það hérna á eftir. Viðtalið við Pettiford tók ég hérna fyrir vikunni, þannig að það var textað en Black hérna komin í beina útsendingu, þannig að þetta viðtal verður textað hér í endursýningunni og svo vantarlega á netinu. William, welcome to Iceland.
Thank you.
You are a former senior regulator, now you're a university professor. You were involved in the savings and loan crisis in the 80s. You are here to give a lecture which will take place at the University of Iceland tomorrow. The title of the lecture is Why Economists Must Embrace the F Word. What is the F word?
This is the F word you can talk about in polite company. This is the 5-letter one, fraud.
Yes.
But economists have not had a theory to deal effectively with fraud. They've ignored it. They've assumed that it couldn't happen, and it produces recurrent crises. And so it's critical that they take it seriously and develop real theories.
You are of the opinion that fraud has been committed on a large scale before the credit crisis. Well, can you explain that to me?
Sure. In the United States context, this is mostly a story of mortgages, and particularly the subprime and the liar's loans, as they were called. So it's, you know, if they're called liar's loans, probably there's a problem there, and indeed there was. Our Federal Bureau of Investigation, the FBI, began warning publicly in September 2004, years and years ago, that there was an epidemic of mortgage fraud developing. Their words. The way you optimize that kind of fraud is to grow extremely rapidly. In the United States, we call this a Ponzi scheme.
Ponzi scheme, yes.
Right? And you loan to people who can't pay you back because they will pay the higher interest rates and they will pay higher fees, and then we call it leverage. This is borrow like crazy so that your return on equity can go up massively. If you do those three things, and a bunch of you do at the same time, you will create a financial bubble, and you will guarantee that you will have record profitability. And then that kicks into the compensation system, which is completely out of control in the United States, but is out of control in many places, where there are perverse incentives from this ability to create this fictional income. You can get absolutely rich in only 2 or 3 years with the executive compensation, and then the place fails, but you're left a rich person.
So this was fraud committed by the top, those at top, the big companies, the CEOs of the big companies.
That's right. It's by far the greatest losses occur when the CEO is the crook. We call it in criminology control fraud, because the person who controls a seemingly legitimate corporation but is really an illegal enterprise designed to loot. And there's a Nobel Prize winner, George Akerlof and Paul Romer in the United States, who wrote it just that way. The title of their article, and this is back in 1993, is Looting Bankruptcy for Profit.
Yes.
So the profit, of course, goes to the CEO. The rest of us are left with the losses.
But this is you get famously rich by fraudulent lending practices.
Yes.
By lending money to people who can't pay, or
yes, and this is not just a U.S. phenomenon. I mean, you can look at Russia. No one much doubts that there was fraud and corruption in abundance in terms of making the plutocrats that you see, and some of whom were fairly tightly involved with key Icelandic bankers in all of this. You can look to what we call the Washington Consensus in Latin America, which made lots of people rich through frauds as well.
But it's the system, so the system has not been dealing with it. What about the regulators?
Well, the regulators at one time actually did deal with it, and then the book in part is how do you deal with it.
This is the saving loans crisis.
Right, but just as an example of how you combat these kind of control frauds, we got 1,000 felony convictions of senior insiders So these are elites, and that's that's the greatest success against elite white-collar criminals there's ever been. And we did it in two ways. One, we realized that optimizing this kind of accounting fraud, and the weapon of choice is accounting to do these frauds,
Yes.
produces a distinctive pattern that honest banks don't follow. And so we identified the fraudulent ones even while they were reporting record profits,
Yes.
and moved to put them out of business. The second thing is we realized any of these have an Achilles heel, and the Achilles heel is growth. A Ponzi scheme must grow very rapidly or it dies, so we restricted growth and we killed all the Ponzis.
But this time the big banks were involved because everything was merged, the commercial side of the banks and the venture side of it. And
Well, it was worse than that. We had the Bush administration, and the Bush administration absolutely didn't believe in regulation and didn't believe that regulation was necessary. So we have famous conservative economists and lawyers who have created policy, and their statement is that a rule against fraud is not necessary or even particularly important, right? So they had this bizarre belief that markets, prevent all frauds, but if frauds gain a competitive advantage, if cheaters prosper, then markets drive honest businesses out of the marketplace and become dominated by the crooks.
But will this be investigated or dealt with, do you think?
Well, it's happening in many places.
Yeah.
Tunneling in Eastern Europe was the famous version of it. In the United States, despite the FBI warnings, what happened is the September 11th terrorist attacks on the United States responded by taking 500 FBI agents who specialized in white-collar crime and transferring them to the anti-terrorism. You can understand that, but then the Bush administration refused to replace them. And so white-collar prosecutions are down dramatically. In the regulatory ranks, the head of our key supervisory agency that dealt with most of these worst mortgage providers famously came to a press conference with a chainsaw next to the three leading lobbyists for the banking industry with pruning shears. And they were poised over a pile of federal regulations to demonstrate their intention to destroy all regulation. Well, they succeeded, and we now know what happens when you destroy banking regulation. You get the greatest amount of fraud and the greatest economic crisis in anybody's lifetime.
So you think that fraud is one of the reasons of the crisis?
It's a dominant reason, actually, of the crisis. And it leads first, of course, to this first stage fraud in things like mortgages and things like home loans and things like, in the Icelandic context, more business loans, especially business loans to affiliates. Right? These are the sweetheart insider deals. But then you have to cover up the losses. So there's a second phase, the cover-up phase, where you engage in accounting fraud to hide the real losses. And since these are publicly traded companies, certainly in the U.S. context, when you do that, that is a felony to engage in securities fraud. And I think that there are a number of potential criminal responses here in Iceland as well.
Well, yes, what about Iceland? Iceland became sort of the victim of what you could call casino capitalism.
Right. In fact, it's the leading example in world history of casino capitalism, that you don't really need a real economy, that you can have a banking sector that is 10 times your gross domestic product, and that all of that can be real and can make everyone fabulously wealthy. And you saw the numbers. Iceland was supposedly the top of the charts in the world on quality of living and economics. But none of it was real, right? It was based on all kinds of ignoring of the real losses, the real risks. In finance, when you understate risk, you overstate value.
Yes.
Massively. And here, like we've just gone through this exercise with our latest phony stress tests. Well, you had stress tests, I think, in August of 2008, and they all the banks passed with flying colors. And 3-4 months later, every one of the largest banks is not only dead, but, putrefying dead, collapsed type of situation. So you cannot, the previous guest you just had on talked about the failures of economists, and they have been absolutely legendary. And I'm somebody with joint appointments in economics and law.
Yes.
So, it's many of our colleagues at other places that have contributed to this crisis.
So how do we investigate what happened in Iceland? What should we look for?
Well, you do it in two different ways, it strikes me. One, you have the criminal justice side. And the second, in the U.S. context, we would call it a PCORA investigation, after the famous former prosecutor who was put in charge of our legislative investigation during the Great Depression of what caused the crisis. And he was given, we call it subpoena authority, the ability to demand books and records and testimony. And he brought the leading perpetrators in so that America could see them, force their testimony under oath, expose these insider deals. The President of the United States, the former president before Franklin Delano Roosevelt, it turned out, was buying stock at half price.
Herbert Hoover.
Herbert Hoover's buying price at
So you think
stock.
open hearing, open investigation?
Absolutely. Has to be open, has to have authority to compel testimony, compel documents, must be transparent to do these things, must not be partisan. You have to get someone who is an experienced investigator of elite white-collar criminals. This is a very different skill set. You have to be very aggressive, but not nasty. I mean, you don't have to be rude, but you have to be very aggressive and very persistent in doing this. Then you need, on the criminal justice side, an investigation that is more traditional, where you're going to look for lower-level officials who have, the key facts, and you're going to make agreements with them in terms of, you give us the information and things won't be so bad for you, but tell us about what the people on top were giving the orders. And you have to get the documents before they're destroyed. Right? So you have to immediately go out, and in the modern era, it's going to be emails frequently that are going to trip these people up.
Yes.
Because people are much freer in emails than in formal written documents. They think the emails have been destroyed, but the backup tapes exist. So there are lots of ways that experienced investigators know. And Iceland went and hired Ms. Jolie, who's famous internationally for his skills. So that was, I thought, a very good step by the Icelandic government.
But are you sure that fraud has been committed in Iceland?
I've been here 6 hours.
Yes, no, but comparing you have a lot of experience in dealing with. We have been talking about fraudulent lending, and you mentioned fraudulent lending to buddies, to friends, to cronies.
Right, and in every other advanced country, there are firm limits on who you can lend to, who it is an affiliate. That we all know that holding companies are the way you use these scams. Right? That's the most common thing. And so all the other countries, all your Nordic relatives, after the crises of the 80s and the 90s, where they had have firm rules in dealing with the holding companies. I think you're going to find your problems in your dealings between your banks and your holding companies.
Of course, we had the several big holding companies owning banks, insurance companies.
And my understanding is you don't have really the appropriate restrictions on transactions between affiliates, nor did you have really effective regulation at all of the holding companies. And if you don't regulate the holding company, frauds will move to wherever the weakest area is. So you create what we call a regulatory black hole, and people will exploit it.
Yes. There is much discussion of tax havens that have been utilized by the elites of the world.
Right.
Do you think it's important to open them up?
It's essential because it isn't just taxes that they're evading. They evade regulatory laws all the time. They're used to hide embarrassing documentation behind the wall of secrecy. And because the way we prove other crimes is frequently through tax records.
Yes.
So if we don't get access to those tax records, we can't prove the accounting fraud. And these are countries really, that in many ways are parasites
Yes.
on the world body. And they get rich off of it, but it's a seamy business, and it destroys their own country.
Can
It
you
creates
imagine
corruption.
that some people actually dreamed of transforming Iceland into a financial paradise, into a tax haven of this sort?
Well, they turned Iceland into a giant hedge fund, so a tax haven was what was coming next.
Yes,
It was going to be the Luxembourg offshore.
yes. Was that a bad idea?
It would have been a horrific idea. It would have brought even greater wealth in the short term, but tax havens invariably create immense corruption. You attract the worst possible people to your shores.
Yes.
The dictators who are ripping off their countries, the drug dealers, international terrorism, you name it. They will all come to wherever the tax havens are. And there is no way you can deal with those people on a daily basis without coming up slimy yourself.
Of course, it can be said that we adopted the policies of the Chicago school here, rather literally for a while.
And it had the same success it had in most other parts of the world. Chicago School is what I was quoting about people claiming not only did you not need, in our context, a Securities and Exchange Commission, an FBI, you didn't even need rules against fraud, because markets are so perfect that they spot fraud instantly, they spot all risks instantly, and they prevent all crises. Well, in the Chicago School of Economics, financial bubbles are impossible. Iceland's impossible. It never happened.
Yeah.
Except, of course, it did.
Just one final question. Do you think we are coming out of the crisis? Now President Obama, some are disappointed by him because he's pumping money into the banks, and the banks have been rallying on the stock market. Do you think we are seeing a recovery?
We're seeing the biggest giveaway of taxpayer dollars in history to elites under the Obama financial program, which is a continuation of the Bush financial program. There's been substantial change in the United States with the new administration in many areas, but not in finance. If anything, it's actually become worse.
Okay. So you're not very optimistic?
Not on the financial side.
No. William, you are giving a lecture at the university tomorrow at 12 o'clock? And
I think a panel discussion
after
that.
Yeah. Ég þakka fyrir í dag. Þetta viðtal verður þýtt hér í kvöld og ég ætla líka að passa upp á að það verður sendt inn á netið með þýðingu, en ég verð hér aftur að viku liðinni. Takk fyrir að horfa.